This is the Cliff Yates Show. Personal growth, motivation, inspiration, and philosophies for a great life.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Cliff Yates Show. And as always, I have a great guest today. I'm really excited to talk with this young gentleman, and we're going to talk about his life and what he has done. We've kind of themed this episode, the why behind the what, and we're going to talk about his experience. Hopefully he'll want to talk about his near-death experience, dealing with chronic pain, depression, and how he turned that all around. And that's what we're all about here. So I'm really happy to have on the show today Mr. Mathew Sanjari. Mathew, thanks for joining me, man. Oh, hang on, brother. I muted you for a second. All right, let's start. Hey, Mathew, thanks for joining me. I really am happy to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Cliff. I'm pumped to be here.
Hey, start with the near-death accident that you had and what happened with that.
Yeah, so back in about 2012, I got into a really horrific car accident. And to kind of set the stage, I was in my early 20s, a couple years out of university, working a great job. I'd also just planted a church with a bunch of friends. And so life was good, right? Great family, great friends. And then, one day I was just driving home late at night from a girl I was dating, her house. She lived in the country at the time. And on my drive home, a couple minutes before midnight, two horses jumped out onto the road. And I don't know if you know anything about horses. I certainly didn't. But they were Clydesdales.
Oh,
and so bigger than my SUV. I was driving an SUV at the time. They were bigger than my SUV. Couldn't do anything. It like pitch black at night, slammed on the brakes, and I hit them. The car just absolutely destroyed, whirlwind, the whole bit. And it's the country, right? So
yeah,
houses are spread out, ditches on both sides. And so, yeah, when everything kind of stopped, the car stopped spinning and I kind of got my bearings. I had to jam my way out, use my elbow to because the car frame had bent. And so anyways, I ended up going to the hospital the whole bit. They ended up measuring the distance and it was 3 inches. 3 inches and I'd be toast.
Wow.
And I did, I went to the hospital, but I did what every young, dumb 20-something male did. And I just, thought everything would be okay and thought I was invincible. I survived. And as time went on, I started to realize as the days became weeks and weeks became months, I started to realize things are not okay. Depression, cluster headaches, chronic physical pain, all these things started to build up. They started to affect my ability to play sports, to interact with people, to do my job, to show up to life. And it really started to, there was a lot of shame in the beginning. So I started to hide a lot of those things. But as time went on, it just became really, really evident that something was wrong.
Yeah, I know. And I know this scene well because I was a cop in upstate New York, real rural area for 5 years. And, people would laugh that our big call was, cows out in the road. But I mean, we had fatal accidents of people hitting cows. And so what were the extent of your injuries when you first went in, or what did they diagnose was wrong?
Yeah. So they weren't sure at first. At first they thought, okay, well, you definitely got a concussion. And, in the aftermath, I basically went home and for 3 days straight, I didn't leave my bed. I slept. And I had concussions playing football and sports. And so, this one felt pretty on par with that, maybe a little bit worse, but nothing out of the ordinary. And again, I'm in pain, but I'm also, I think I was 23 or 24 at the time. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, you know what, this pain will go away. Maybe I'll go to a physiotherapist, I'll go to a massage therapist, whatever. But, as time started to go by, I would find myself at work and I would just kept rubbing my head. I was like, what's this pain? And I people would always say, hey, this is what a brain freeze feels like when you have something cold too quick. And I could never relate. I'd never had that. And so I'm starting to think, I'm like, oh, is this like a brain freeze? Like, is this a headache? I didn't have a history of headaches. I didn't know what that was. And so I started to find myself closing the door to my office, kind of slinking down in my seat, going to the washroom for extended periods of time and just sitting on, in the washroom, kind of just like, man, I'm in pain. What is happening? I can't focus. And it got so bad that, I'd close my door sometimes in my office and I would just lie down. And again, I'm not telling people what's happening.
Yeah.
I'm scared. I have no idea what's actually happening. Um, and so I finally go to the doctors, and it's concerning enough at this point. I've got chronic pain all throughout my neck and my back. I've got these headaches that I don't know where they come from. I don't know how to stop them. Like, again, not in my vocabulary. I'm out here trying medications, I'm trying pills, I'm trying anything to stop pain. I'm taking the highest dose of industrial grade headache relief you could take, because I'm like, I got to figure this
Wow.
out, right?
Did they have any idea? So when they released you, it was like you're going to be okay, or there was nothing that they were concerned
They
with?
kept me there. They kept me there for 6 hours, and they were like, you know what? You have a concussion. Go home for a few days, rest up. You'll be fine. And to be fair to them, I couldn't even quantify what a headache was, let
I
alone the physical
gotcha.
thing I was
Wow.
feeling, right? So as time went on, I remember going to my family doctor. My family doctor was like, I have no idea. I have maybe, a few inklings, but we need to go get you set up. And to be honest, I actually didn't get clarity, and I probably still don't have clarity, because the closest I've come to a diagnosis on my head has been, one of the best neurologists out there, who said, I'm fairly certain this is what you have, but I actually can't knock it down. And so, I went on this journey where I had, yes, people could notice that I was in pain, but for a long time, I kind of have and still struggle with a lot of these symptoms, this invisible
Wow.
illness.
Yeah.
Like, how do you quantify that? How do you qualify that? Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Man, I had like last year, once in a while, I have maybe I have a disc. I was in back pain for like, 2 or 3 weeks. I'm thinking, how do people have chronic, how do they deal with this? Because it was like, like you said, it was distracting to my to thinking daily, yeah. And I just thought, people who are in chronic pain, I can't imagine what they go. Now, you look like you're in great shape now. How did you do workouts, or you exercise, or what do you do?
Oh, thank you. I mean, honestly, life got real dark after that. Like, I went
Yeah.
through a year period where I had zero clarity, and I'm trying to figure things out. And I had to quit my job. So I'm not working. I'm depressed. I'm lying on my parents' floor. I have no
Oh
idea what's
my
wrong with
God.
me.
Wow. You had to quit your
Spending money.
job. Oh my God. Yeah.
And again, like, everything felt so promising, right? Here I am, early to
Yeah.
mid 20s, planting a church, have a great job. They're sending me across North America. I'm traveling and, doing talks and things like that. I had a great setup. And so here I am, I quit my job. I can't work. I now start to think to myself, I'm like, who's going to hire me? Right?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how capable I think I am or how smart I think I am. Who's taking a risk on a guy who he might not come to work for 3 days? He might not even answer the phone.
Yeah. That's right.
Right. And so now I'm processing all these things, and, God bless my parents. Thank God that I was with them.
Yeah.
But I'm also like, I'm struggling with this idea that I'm like, okay, I also got to move on with my life. So, I move out, and now I'm like, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do for work. I don't know how I'm going to live. And this shift happened where, basically, out of the blue, a friend called me. He was working at a pool shop, and he said, hey, you're good with computers. And I said, yeah. And he was like, can you come in and help my boss? He just needs, I think he was just trying to throw me a bone, if we're honest. And I
Yeah.
was like, absolutely, anything. Right. Because I'm sitting here, I'm like, man, I can't work. I can't make money. That's taking a toll on me, because I'm not wired that way. I need to be contributing to society and doing
Yeah.
something. And anyway, long story short, I went in, helped them with their problem, chatted up the business owner. And somehow at the end of that, even though I don't have a marketing degree and didn't go to school for marketing, he hired me to do his marketing, and I turned that into my first marketing client. And that's how I started my first business. And
Wow.
and so for the next few years, Cliff, started a business, had no idea what I was doing. As quickly as I was adding clients, I was losing them, because the head was so bad, the pain was so bad.
Wow.
And during this time, because you had asked about the working out, like, up until 2016, I remember I'm struggling with depression. I'm struggling with these headaches. When I get these headaches, I hide out in my basement, turn off all the lights. Sometimes people don't hear from me for weeks at a time. And that's so unlike me, because I'm an extrovert. I need to be around people 7 days a week.
Yeah.
And I remember looking in the mirror, and I basically, one day, I just walked up the stairs. I'm like, I could barely catch my breath. I was 315 pounds
What?
at this
You're
point.
kidding me. Oh,
Yeah,
gee.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
and how tall are you?
I'm about 5'7". Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So think of that. I'm 315 pounds. So I tell people, I'm like, I've literally lost a person.
Yeah.
That's the
Oh, you
thing.
have. Yeah.
And so, but I remember looking at myself and I was like, man, my business sucks. I'm creeping up there now. I'm starting to get into my late 20s. I'm like, I don't know what's happening. I'm upset at life. I'm upset at God. I'm upset at friends, family, the whole
Yeah.
bit. And I had this kind of deja vu moment where I was like, man, there's a lot of things I can't control. I didn't ask for this accident. Can't control the health pains. Can't control the depression. I just can't control out of this. But these unhealthy habits around eating, what if I could try and change that? And that spurred me on a journey where basically I had this idea that I'm like, I cannot, there's this business axiom that's you can't you can't measure what you don't manage. And so
Right.
I said,
That's
okay.
right. Yeah.
I said, okay, I'm going to measure every part of my health that I can obsessively. And so I did. Every day I started to chart out what's working, what's not working, right?
Wow.
Did I get my steps in today? How many stairs did I climb? What did I eat? And within a couple of years, I lost 150 pounds.
Wow. God bless you, man. That is awesome. So that goes to like, what they say is, well, maybe it was Aristotle or somebody says, a life not examined is not worth living. But that's so every day, and I try to do this too. You look, what did I do today? Did I do this right? Did I do that right? Did I make my steps? So that was a key aspect of you getting to where you are.
Changed my life, right?
Yeah.
That simple adage I've now taken, because the revelation hit me. I was like, well, if this worked in my health, can it work in my business?
Oh
Can it
yeah.
work can it work in my life? Can it work in? And so now I tell people, like, I'm not wired this way. I'm an A type. I'm a dreamer. I'm a builder. I don't care about details. I do not care about systems and
Yeah.
structures. And it's funny because now I do that for a living and I love those things. I
Wow.
had to teach
Yeah.
myself that. Right. And I actually help others with those. But it's because I had to come to this place where I was like, this works. And so I know, just like if I wake up, I have my routine. I'm not a routine guy, but I know that
Right.
if I live within my routine, then I can paint outside the lines the rest of the day
That's
or the
right. Yeah.
rest of the week. Right.
Yeah.
And so if I get up and I go to the gym, I spend some time with God. I go in
Yeah.
and I, just process my thoughts, get some of the news into me, understand what's happening in the world. By the time I hit the ground running, I'm like, man, I can pretty much guarantee I'm going to have a good day today.
Absolutely. I like what you said when you said, if that worked here, it can work there. That's like my main message is, there's no, Maxwell was the one, they tried to get him to write a book about business leadership. He says, I'm not going to do it because there's no such thing. There's only leadership. So, I mean, if you are, these are principles. If you're using it here and it works, it's going to work over here. It's a principle that's universal. So that was great that you came to that realization.
Totally. Right.
I want to
Sorry,
ask
go
you,
ahead.
not to interrupt you, but I'm just interested because you're like me, even though I'm a little bit older, but you were of that, either brought up or maybe because you're involved in sports. I don't know, but you were of that mindset. I can't just lay here in the house. I've got to be doing something. And you dragged yourself out and you pushed yourself. So where did those principles come from? Parents, or where did they come from?
Yeah. So I'm a first generation. My father's a refugee. My mother's an immigrant.
Oh,
And so,
oh,
so
from where?
so my dad's from Iran and my mom's from Guyana.
Okay.
Yeah, so strange mix. I love it. A strange
Yeah.
mix. But yeah, so a lot of these ideas and these principles were. It's funny. I don't even know if I ever had formal conversations with my parents. Like, yes, they pass along wisdom and whatever. But
Yeah.
so much of my life now that I look back, I was like, this is osmosis. Like, I
Yeah.
literally looked and I saw this, both good and bad, right? But when we talk about the why behind the what, like I saw my father do uncomfortable things that I know he hated because he
Yeah.
was like, yeah, but this is what needs to be done, and this is the right thing.
Right.
And so for
Wow.
me, constantly putting myself in positions now, with my health, with relationships where I'm like, I don't want to necessarily come out and solve this conflict, but it's the right thing to do. Right.
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
Oh
I,
man. Yeah.
I don't know, like when things were rough, especially, I mean, now I kind of love it, but in the beginning I was like, personal, like ownership, personal responsibility. Like, are you kidding me? Can we just like let time go and hope that things
Yeah.
pass by?
Yeah. Yeah.
And now I look back and I'm like, I don't see another way. I want to live the kind of life that has these things because they tangibly reflect in my business, my health, my relationships, and my life.
Yeah, this constantly comes up that, my wife's Cuban, right? She was born in Cuba. And then she came when she was 6. And that was a realization that I had. And now I see it in you too, that, and her father, he didn't go a day where he wasn't wearing an American flag. If he saw Reagan, he would cry. And just the kind of a slap in the face that I got. This is what patriotism is about, and I was kind of brought up, taking it for granted. And so I started to become more aware of it. This is back like 10, 15 years ago. And now look what's happening. And I'm kind of feeling like, well, we just need to stand up for what's right. And it sounds like, man, we're kind of on the same path there. And you're doing good things, man.
Oh, so much so. And thank you. Like, and again, I think it really goes back to that upbringing for me and,
Yeah.
who I've really surrounded myself with as years have gone by. But so much of that tenacity and resolve that have helped me push through the health stuff, keep going in business, trying to make something of myself, a functioning, contributing member of society. I
Yeah.
think so much of that was seeing my parents endure hardship, both leaving, especially as I got older, to understand like, wow, you guys left everything you knew for a better life. And you were like determined not only to make it, but to make it happen well, right? To make friends, to be an
Yeah.
asset to your communities, to leave the world. One thing I always tell my clients is like, I think my definition of leadership is I always want to leave people better than when I first met them.
Yeah.
And I look at my parents and I think that was their approach, was that no matter who came into our house, no matter who they interacted with, rightly or wrongly, good or bad, it was, I'm going to leave people. I'm going to leave groups of people. I'm going to leave this business. I'm going to leave my community better than how I found it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such a great principle. I agree with that too. And so your website, I love your website, consultingbyprime.com. Is that your website?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and so I'm going to send people over there and have all the links in the description when we're done. But so what do you do? What's your business model there? That you have these clients. Are you consulting just on the business framework or life, or what are you doing?
Yeah, so it's so interesting. Full transparency, Cliff. I actually got into the coaching consulting game by accident. I ran a marketing business for 10 years and also dabbled in some real estate and loved it. And then in about 2022, I came to a place where I was like, I'm kind of bored.
Yeah.
I just want a new challenge. I feel like I want to be influencing and impacting people. And, it's funny, whether it's been pastoring, real estate, marketing, or now this, I've realized whatever the skin is of what I'm doing like that outside, the why or the goal has always been the same. And that's, I love seeing people reach their potential and walk into what's actually on their lives, right? Whether that's business, whether that's
Right.
spiritual,
Yeah.
whatever it is, because that's what I had to do for me. Right.
Yeah. It's addicting. Yeah. It's people don't realize. I didn't realize till, many years ago, man, serving other people, you get back tenfold what you put out. It's almost not fair.
Oh man. And so this business coaching, basically once I sold the business, I just kind of waited for a few months, kind of biding my time. And then it's funny. I thought, I was like, oh, you know what? Let's take a break. I haven't really taken a break from working in a long time.
Yeah.
And I think I went a few weeks and I was like, yeah, I'm bored out of my mind. I need to be contributing to society in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And so anyway, long story short, an old client called me and said, hey, enjoyed your marketing, but to be honest, we actually didn't care for the marketing. We could have hired any marketer. We just loved working with you. We loved the questions you asked. We love how you actually cared about us, that you always shot us straight on what we needed, even when it didn't necessarily reflect in us buying things from you. So why don't you do that for our entire business? And I was both thrilled. And on the other side, there was a lot of imposter syndrome that hit the moment that I hung up that phone. I was like, this is great. Also, I don't know if I'm qualified to do this. So
right. You're like, you didn't have a framework to do that, right? It's just, you have been doing it naturally. And now they want to plug you into the whole organization.
Exactly. And for me, I had, especially in different, working with nonprofits, churches, I developed leaders, I did a lot of leadership development. So I started to sit back and I was like, okay, wait. Maybe I don't have the terminology. Maybe I don't have the framework established. What if we just start writing down all these things that worked? And so I did. And I started telling friends that own businesses. They start telling people, next thing you know, in a few months, I had a full-fledged business.
Wow.
And that's where we sit now. And so I'm a bit of a hybrid, I'd call it, in that as a business coach, I work with owners, entrepreneurs, and anybody high performing to say, how do we get you optimized and running the best you can, right?
Yes.
I'm not saying that I'm going to make you to $10 million. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, how do I get you to understand what your why is and get you operating beautifully to the maximum of that, right? And then on the consulting side, the other side of my business, well, I work with the operations and the management teams to help them implement these things. So there's the why and there's the what. And when you marry both of them together, I believe that you get something crazy. So
yeah, no, you are right on. I went to my first, I had been disgruntled with my police job. This is back in 1990. And so I said, I'm going to show them. And I went and got my real estate license in California. And then I'm going to make money, and now I'm going to be repaid by my work. But then they sent me to Jim Rohn, and so I got to see him live, and then that ended up sending me to Tony Robbins. And then, man, when I started turning myself around, then my career turned around in the sheriff's department. I ended up staying and retiring, but getting into this unlimited mindset. And so I just can't help but sharing that with people. But one of the things, the key components was get to the why first, and then don't worry about the how, because that's going to take care of itself. And we kind of turn that around. So you're right on. Get to that why first. Don't worry about the how, because that's going to come along.
Totally. And I know you know it better than me, but I cannot tell you how many times that I'm in conversations with people and conversations with clients when they start out with me, and I have to disarm and I have to say, finding your why is not some voodoo. It's not some hocus pocus. We're not going down this mystical journey where I ask you 10 questions. I need you to get your why, and I need you to understand it, because when hard times come up, because a lot of these business owners and a lot of these leaders have already faced hard times. So we often will kind of go back to that. When things come up, when your business is struggling, when you're struggling, when you feel overwhelmed, it's your why that's going to carry you through. The idea of 7 or 8 figures, that's temporary. That's never enough. I promise you, you'll chase the next thing once you get there.
Absolutely.
Something underpinning. And when I ask people those questions, first off, they're pretty amazed, because oftentimes I think, in my line of work, that's not something we often get down to the brass tacks right away.
Yeah.
And secondly, I think it's amazing that people start to voice what they're actually afraid of and what their fears are. And that sets the stage for a really holistic conversation about how to move forward. Yeah,
that's so true. Yeah. I'm going to have you coach me on this. So are you a pastor, or you were a pastor? Or?
Yeah. I was a pastor on and off for about 14 years.
Okay. And I like just a Bible based or Christian based, or what?
Yeah. It was a Christian church. Yeah. Loved it.
Yeah. I go to a great Bible-based church here, and my Christian walk has been really great for the past, 5 years. However, I get into the imposter syndrome. Like I'm hesitant to share that, because who am I to say this? Because 15 years before that, I wasn't. So why should I be sharing this? But, I feel sometimes obligated. What is it? 1 Peter says, right? Or something, be prepared to defend why you are so joyous, right? So.
Yeah.
Yeah. So are you still active in the church, or?
I'm not right now. I'm actually in a season of transition. I do hope that I'll get back into it at some point.
Yeah.
But just with all that's happened in the last few years, and the pandemic, and now this new business, it's definitely something like, it's always going to be a priority for me. But it's probably something that from a more like part-time, full-time thing, I'll probably hope to get into more in the future.
Well, you're probably doing it. What's the saying? I like to use this. I preach the word all day long, and sometimes I use words. You're probably doing it with your actions and how you deal with people.
Totally. And sure. I hope so, because at the end of the day, that stuff, it's like, it's just, again, it's osmosis, right? Like, it's who I am. It's how I live, hopefully, for the most part. And,
that's right.
And so I just think it's inevitable. And some of the conversations I get to have with people, absolute strangers that come out of that, I think is like some of my favorite stuff.
I think, I love osmosis, and it goes with the saying, right? You kind of become the 4 or 5 people that you hang around. And so I like to have some people that I can maybe pull up, some people that are kind of a couple clicks ahead of me, and then some people that were on the same same wavelength. So I kind of like to have that kind of group around me. So it's been 12 years since the accident. How about your pain and what you're dealing with now?
Uh, Honestly, there's good days and bad days. So
Okay.
it's funny because I'll talk to people, and when I'm good, no one would ever know. But I still get the headaches. I still have the pain.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing really helps headaches. They're just kind of up and down. I think my perspective has changed, and I think what I've done in terms of putting systems and structures in my life to help mitigate the fallout when those things happen. Everything around it's changed, but the situation itself is not.
Yeah. Where are you at? Where do you reside? Where's your business? But you probably
Yeah,
coach
so
online and whatever too, right? So,
yeah, I'm everywhere. So split a bunch of time between Canada and the United States,
oh,
and
Canada.
yeah, between Canada and the United States. So when you said upstate New York, I was like, I've been upstate New York way too many times,
Yeah,
way too
yeah.
many. But yeah, so primarily Florida and Canada as well. But I've got clients in Canada, the U.S., and Europe. So it is a lot of
Okay.
virtual, but I also love the in person whenever I get the opportunity to fly in because there's just something about being in a room together and
Yeah.
I'm in a really relational field, in my opinion. And so part of the enjoyment for me is building relationship with people and
Yeah.
actually like getting to know them and hearing their stories. And, so
Yeah. What side of Canada? On the east side or the west? What?
yeah, the East. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
So,
great. Yeah, we have an island in the Thousand Islands, so we're the Canada's. I'm looking at Canada all day long, and we're between. So we're probably 4 hours down from Montreal. Yeah. So
oh yeah, that's
yeah,
awesome. I'm not far at all. And I know that whole area like real well. Like
yeah,
I said, I grew up going to like Plattsburgh, Lake George, Syracuse, stuff like
yeah,
that.
yeah. So I'm the islands, thousand. The St. Lawrence River. So
Yeah.
we're probably north of Syracuse, an hour and 45 minutes by car. So yeah, love
Okay.
it. It's just beautiful country up
Oh,
there. Matter of fact, we're going to
yeah.
get back to Montreal. That's where we had our honeymoon, and I want to get back there maybe this year. But it's been a few years since we've been kind of able to go over there and travel. So looking forward to it this year. Great.
Oh, it's the best. It's where I'm from actually originally. It's where I was born.
Wow, awesome. And they have beautiful lakes up there and just places that are untouched. People fly in to fish to all these lakes that are way out in the nowhere. So that's
Oh,
great.
it's the best. Nature's beautiful.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
that's fantastic. And so what if people want to come to you? Usually businesses, but you do individuals too, right? Individuals and corporations.
I do. So I do I do entrepreneurs, business owners, and their entities, obviously, and then I also work with just high performing leaders. People that say, "Hey, I feel like I've got a lot to offer, but maybe I've got habits that I want to kick. Maybe I feel like I'm stuck." That's one that I hear often is,
Yeah.
how do I get unstuck? And
Yeah.
sometimes it's just the paralysis, and I've been there, right? You feel
Yes.
like the world's your oyster, but and now my perspective is, oh, blank canvas, we can do anything. But back then it was blank canvas. Where do I start?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah. And so I tell people I'd love to connect with them. Instagram, LinkedIn, either one works, or they can go to my website.
Okay. And so I'm going to link to all those things. So we'll be on YouTube and also the podcast platforms. And yeah, that's great. I forgot something you said clicked right there. Relationships definitely. That was one of the big keys that turned me around. It was like, so I started developing relations. You know what in the sheriff's department, this is what they said to people that were like in the golf part of the department. Well, that guy's a kiss ass. And I changed my paradigm, right? So I started looking at things. No, I'm not kissing ass. I'm developing rapport with people who can do things for me. And so it was all about relationships. And I remember I worked with this guy, a detective, and we were at the Universal substation in LA. And this guy had 2 master's degree. He was a great detective, and he was having trouble promoting. And I remember I had the main station was separate, but I used to go down there and stop in and talk to the captain just to say hi, and then I would leave. Right, I never asked for anything. Hey, captain, I just peeking in. No one does that, right? They always want something. And so I remember him telling me, he goes, "I've been here 4 years. I've never even talked to the captain." I go, "That's the problem, People want to promote and support people they know. They see the list of names. Oh, wait a minute. Mathew, I know him. I like him." And so you got to develop, it's relationships, right? I mean,
Totally. And I think that, whether it's the faith angle or whether it's just living a holistic life, I just want everything in my life is relational, right?
Yeah.
This business that I have now, some of my clients were in my last venture, and I
Yeah.
cared for them enough that they were like, we don't care that you did marketing. We buy into you, right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
So many of the people that I, pastored and led and developed, I still spend time with and hang out with, even though they've moved. Some of them live across Texas, California, Vancouver, and the Canadian West Coast. Because at the end of the day, it's relationship. To me,
That's
it's
right.
never a
Yeah.
transaction. And if it becomes a transaction, I don't want any part of it because, and I imagine you feel this way. You can
I
make
do.
money anywhere. You can make money anywhere. I tell people this all the time, but I want to go and I want to feel fulfilled and I want to feel like I'm living out my purpose. And that's way more important to me.
Yeah. Once you have, I don't know, Jim Rohn would say, set a goal to be a millionaire, not for the money, but for what you will become in attaining it. And, most of these millionaires, they've lost it 5 times over. It doesn't matter because they'll make that back because of their mindset and the philosophies that they have towards life and business. So much more important to have that than it's a good way to keep score, but that's not the main reason, right?
Totally. Totally.
Yeah, man, I try to, God, it's so, yeah. I had, on the sheriff's department, I didn't want to promote. I liked working patrol and being on the streets. And so, but a sergeant makes $1,000 more a month than a deputy does. So I thought for retirement, if I retire at 70%, that's going to be $700 extra a month just on the promotion. So
Yeah,
I went after it for the wrong reason. That was the reason, the motivation originally. But then when I got into it and thinking this is a terrible job, I'm going to be responsible for these people, and I don't even know what they're doing out there. And then, I got promoted, and man, it was so fulfilling and rewarding to be able to lead people. And I loved it more than I thought I ever would. And no one ever told me that story, but it's, and I was going to get to the point where, and you have people who tell you, well, it's you that we connect with, but just think of the people that don't. I ran into somebody after retirement. They go, Sarge, working with you was the best time I ever had on the department. I mean, that you couldn't give me $1 million. It wouldn't make up for how I felt after that for about 2 years. Right.
Same, right? I had someone reach out on LinkedIn last week and said, hey, you know what? I'm going through a tough time, but I remember a conversation we had 7 years ago. And so, we're hopefully going to go for lunch or coffee. But to me, it's crazy because you plant so many seeds when you're relationally.
Right. Yeah.
And you don't even know the impact. You have no idea how that affects somebody, how it changes somebody. And to get just some of those come back and to hear somebody say, hey, we talked 7 years ago and it changed my perspective.
Yeah.
I sit there like, okay, I totally understand, right? In the moment, maybe you don't see it, but we're living kind of 1 foot in the present, 1 foot in the future. And I think that's the way we want to live, right? So
yeah. How do you your circle of friends or connections, do you like mostly high achievers, or what's your kind of circle of group that you hang with personally?
Oh man, that's a great question. A lot of my close friends it's mostly longevity, right? So
Yeah.
it's really interesting. I mean, all my close friends we're looking at, I think the least right now is 11 years, 11 to 17 years. And for me, it's funny because yes, there's a few things that we all kind of get along around, whether sports or, games, whatever. But it's this idea that they all have really similar character traits and we share same values. So it doesn't matter
Yeah.
that we're all different skin colors, different upbringings. We all grew up in different economic classes. And even today, right, we're at different stages of life, right? I'm engaged. I've got one friend who's got 3 kids already. I've got 2 that just had newborns. And so as I look across the spectrum, the things that unite us, it's like, man, these guys are incredibly loyal, right?
Yeah.
These guys celebrate the junk out of people. And so when I think of those things, it's more their character that seems to be a recurring theme in my clients, in my friends. There's high achievers sprinkled kind of everywhere. Because I like you, I think it's important to have someone to aspire to and people that are going to kind of pull you up. But yeah, I find that character more than achievement is something that I've just naturally drawn. So
yeah, congratulations on your engagement. That's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
There's nothing better than having, my wife is so wonderful. I met her on the department, but man, I mean, because I did stand-up comedy for many years along with the police job. And so, God, she would just go along to all these comedy clubs and just sit there. And even though she's heard it 100 times, but always so supportive, man, it's invaluable. It's just priceless to have that. And, no matter what I'm doing, that I'm doing this all the time. This is what I love doing. So I just went to upstate New York, and I went back to visit my mom because she's 88. She's doing great. She says that I influenced on her workouts now, right? She actually can plank for like a minute and a half. 88 years old.
Wow, that's
and
crazy.
So I just happened to contact 3 people that I worked with on the sheriff's department. So hey, let's meet over at the old Star Diner that's now Peppermints, and I did that with 2 people. And so the 3 of us met there. I just did that. Let's get together while I'm back here. And this is when we had all worked together 45 years ago on this one department, the midnight shift. And man, we just had a great time telling these old stories. But then when we laughed and hugged, a couple of them said, "Hey, thanks for arranging this." I didn't even think about it, but and I almost didn't do it. Maybe I won't bother. People are busy. But man, it had such value to it. So I would suggest anybody, man, don't ever hesitate just to reach to somebody. Let's meet for a cup of coffee. I know it's been a few years, and you know how good friends are. It's like, well, we never even. It's like we met yesterday, not 40 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter how long the gap is. You can tell the quality of a relationship where you just hit back in a conversation, right? So
yeah, and these people have no, a couple of them, they're kind of there's a couple of, they're like in the flip phone days. They have no idea about, technology. Matthew, these guys were like a podcast. I have one friend from upstate. I called him. I go, I have this idea for a podcast. What do you think? And he goes, what's a podcast? I'm like, oh my God, some people are just, I don't know. I'm always like a first adopter. I want to be involved in all these things, man. I don't know. How are you in that? Well, with technology, you're way ahead, right?
I mean, I love technology. I love to be open to those things. I always feel like I have a degree of skepticism, not around adopting, but around like I'll adopt something and I'm like, okay, like, how does this fit in? What can we do to optimize? Like, how can this make our lives better? And so I think one of the biggest things that I preach with all of my clients and has worked for me in my life is this idea that everybody wants to be better. I've never met someone who doesn't want to be better.
Yeah.
Right. But
that's right. Yeah.
But better is such a vague term. And so for me, I actually want to live more optimized, right? I want to spend the majority of my time on things that to me are the most leveraging, the most fulfilling, the most purposeful. And so I think inevitably, as we optimize our lives, our finances, our health, whatever it is, and we're just fine tuning those things into figuring out what works for us and what works for our businesses, then what we're doing is we're creating margin that we can go reallocate to the things that matter, right?
Yes.
Like spending time with our friends, spending time with our families, right? I don't want to get dragged. I mean, it's a function of life, but I don't want to spend an hour a week on administration for my household when those are things that I can just say, let me find a better way to do this. Let me figure out a more optimized way to do this. Because that hour, that's another coffee.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. Yeah.
That's another hour that I could go spend in my, my spiritual relationship.
Yeah.
And so, any of those things. So I find optimization to me is just like an interesting concept. And so when I think of technology, all these things, to me, they're all just tools that I'm like, how can I use this to better optimize who I am and what I'm doing? Yeah,
because I mean, let's say you were going to be a coach of some kind. 20 years ago, you would do it in your community or at your. Now, I mean, can you imagine 15 years ago, you were not able. There was gatekeepers. You could not broadcast to the world your message or your service. Who your customers, where they live, Tokyo, Japan, the United States. You know what I mean? You have reach that is open to you. And I think that's probably maybe in your consulting, you send that message. Listen, there's no more gatekeeper. You want to write a book? Then, you can do it, but you got to start. It's no longer, I can't get the information. Now it's, you're lazy or you better get off your butt and do it because you don't have a gatekeeper anymore. You can do that. So it's niching down get a direction of where you want to go. And you know what? I came to the simplest thing, and it was from Tony Robbins, right? And it seems so simple. Okay, decide what you want to do or get. Okay, what do I got to do to get that? And then start doing those things in the right order. And I started doing this with like several different things. You know, I always wanted to be a pro bowler. So I always said, okay, what do I have to do to do that? Oh, I have to average 200 in a league for 2 years, and then I can get my PBA card and I can compete. I'm going to start doing those things. I joined a league, practice, get my average up. I got my PBA card. And then I just applied that to other things. And like you said earlier, you said those principles, I just applied them somewhere else.
I love that, because at the end of the day, you're right. It's the principle that carries over. And sure, maybe you tailor a few things here and there, but it's that principle. And so I'm finding, and this is one of the things that I love about business coaching, and I also just kind of dislike about the industry, is that I think when it comes to anything of this sort, any kind of coaching, we oftentimes want to put frameworks that have worked for other people onto ourselves super rigidly. And you know what? The 17-step process that Joe worked for Joe might not work for Bob.
That's right.
But what we can do is we can extract, well, why did Joe do those things? What were the principles, right? And if we apply those principles, man, the methodology can change, but the message should remain the same. I don't care what the skin and what the window dressing is. That is going to very much vary by your flavor, where you come from, right? What kind of life you live, what your beliefs are. But the message, I think the message should remain the same across all of it.
Absolutely. How can people work with you, man? Because I know someone's going to hear or see this. They're going to want to work with Mathew Sanjari. Come on. How can they do that? Just go to the website? Is that the best way?
So you can go to consultingbyprime.com. Actually, if they go to consultingbyprime.com/podcast, I've got a free gift there for everybody that goes on. Just a little book on how to get unstuck. Is that
your own podcast? Do you have that?
No. I don't have my own podcast. I just did it for whenever I'm on a podcast. So if you go to consultingbyprime.com/podcast, go there. Or you can look me up, Mathew Sanjari. I love connecting with people on LinkedIn or Instagram. Sanjari is Sanjari.
Yep, I'm going to have that. And God, that's great. So I'm going to, people should work with you, especially if they have you work with any business of any size, right? That maybe and what is your main focus on? What do they want to accomplish when they come to you? They maybe change the culture. Is that what it is? Or
honestly, it's a bit of everything. Like I ask people what their goal is, and then I ask them a few other questions. And by the time I'm done the other questions, they realize that what they thought they came to me for is not why they're coming to me for. But it's honestly the same across, doesn't matter what industry, what vertical you in, people are coming to me because they feel stuck. They feel paralyzed. They feel like they're drowning in the day-to-day.
Got you.
How can I even get ahead and plan and strategize and, all the things that Cliff's talking about on his podcast when I cannot see the trees from the weeds, right? It's bad. And so it's a lot of these things. Then of course, like what you said, culture, right? People come in and say, I work with a client right now, and they want to grow the business. And I said, so how many leaders are you developing in your organization? And they're like, oh, well, we love leadership. We give our staff books to read. And I was like, okay, well, show me your calendar. And I think in an entire year, they had spent maybe 17 hours on leadership in a full year, not even half a week in a full year over the course of the entire year. And I said, hey, if you said you were generous and I looked at your bank account and your bank account showed you weren't given, I don't think we'd call you generous. So I don't think we're going to say that you're about leadership as much as you are. And that harsh reality, right? They sat there and like, but it's getting people to live in reality is such a key component of what I do, because when I get you to acknowledge, I'm like, hey, I'm not here to shame you or blame you.
Yeah.
Now we can train you, right? Now we've got a framework. You're sitting here. We know where we're at. Let's go from here. And so culture is often a big one, but more often than not, people can't diagnose themselves that their culture needs work or their culture needs help. So it's often, I'm drowning, I'm stuck, I don't know what to do. And as I push on the pain points, you find out.
Yeah, so that's important. That their perception was this, but in actuality, when you looked at the data, okay, you're doing leadership all the time. Let's see on paper what it is. And then that's when harsh reality steps, oh man, I guess we're not doing as much as we could. And that's where you're going to provide a service. Well, let's see how we can do more optimization of what we have. That's great, man. I like what you're saying. Let me ask you an opinion, just personal opinion, because I get so into this, personal development and motivation and growth. But then I also think, man, God, maybe I should be more involved in what's actually happening today. How do you balance that? Because I think there is crazy things happening, and maybe as patriot citizens, do we need to be saying more and speaking up and getting more involved? What do you feel about that? Or we shouldn't even be looking at that?
No, hey, I actually think that that's a really, really good question. I think if you're doing, I'm even hesitant to say it this way, but
Yeah,
when you're going down the leadership road and you're going down the personal development road, naturally those principles that you and I have been talking about, radical ownership, taking
right.
personal responsibility,
I like
right?
that. Yeah,
It's this idea that when I go down that road, serving people, I may not be able to change what's on the television, but I can change my world and I
yes,
can impact it for the better. And if more people adopted that attitude, and if more people said, I'm going to take personal responsibility for my family, for my
yeah,
life, for my community, for my workplace, right?
yep,
And and well, if you start to impact your workplace, your church, your family, and other people start doing that, the things that we often read in the media and the news that can so paralyze us,
yeah,
man, it's not to say those aren't real things, but man, I wonder what it would look like if we all just stood up and actually started taking ownership and personal responsibility and started serving people, what that would do to the tide of bad news or things that scare us or the things that are out there. Because at the end of the day, those things exist. You and I both know that, right? There's all kinds of stuff happening, but I think it really starts with us. And
yeah,
it's funny. I think we as humans will isolate, right? If you want to lose a lot of weight, you're like, oh, I'll take personal responsibility over my weight. It's like, hey, that's great. Why don't you take personal responsibility over your entire household? It's like,
yeah. That's right.
oh, that's a lot of work, right?
Yeah,
And so again, it goes back to that why, right? If your why is big enough, then the what will work itself out, but your why has to be big enough.
your why. Everybody get to your why first, and the how will come later, and it may change. So, when you get real with why you want to do these things, why do you want to start this business and make this money? Why do you want to, is it for your family? Is it for a legacy of your children, your grandchildren? When that gets real, then man, you will never lose motivation or energy. It's never going to happen. You're always going to be making it through. I had
Oh,
a
I love
train.
that.
I had a train of thought. Damn it, and I missed it, but I forgot. Yeah, because I was listening. I was so excited about what you were saying. But yeah, and I do that too every day. I love it. That's how having a positive impact on people, and you never know. Sometimes people aren't going to tell you, and then when they do tell you, you think, "Oh man, because sometimes people will say to you, and I'm sure it happens to you a lot with what you're putting out there. That wow, you know what you said really changed me and what I wanted to do. Man, that just means so much when somebody tells you that. For me, I'm gone. I got 6 months of energy right now because I want to multiply. I want to optimize that. I do when I go to the grocery store, right? It's like I'm putting joy out there, right, to people. Hey, how are you? I just habituate that. Not that we're always in a good mood or we're always in a positive state, but if you can be there a high percentage of the time, I'm motivated to do that. As we know, your attitude and your mindset affects your physical health. So, I mean, why wouldn't you selfishly do that? I know what I was going to say, Matthew. It was, and this is like the message, it's almost important to be a little bit selfish. In other words, if we make ourselves better, if we become a better communicator, if we learn how to interact better and see people's point of view before our own and try to maybe understand before we're understood or whatever, that just now the rest of the family benefits from it, right? Our spouse benefits, our friends. Wow, and so it's a little bit selfish, but it's really a gift to those around us, isn't it?
Well, it's funny because I don't even know if I classify it as selfish. I love the example that you gave, where that person came back to you that you had hung out with, and you had said,
Yeah,
"Hey, like, I can't quantify how this feels, but I'd rather this than $1 million."
yeah.
You didn't set out to have that
Nope,
feeling,
didn't.
right? You
No.
didn't say, "Man, if that person doesn't come back to me, if they don't say, Cliff, you changed my life, I'm going to be furious." You didn't do that. You actually just were yourself. You
Yes.
lived out of who you are, and naturally the overflow of that was people responded. And so,
Yeah.
I think that this idea that, man, like, I am going to batten down the hatchet and just take personal responsibility, I'm gonna live in a world where I don't have to bat 1,000. I actually just have to show up,
That's
right?
right. Yeah.
I'm a baseball fan, and I love that the best players are the guys that were like, this guy's only successful 30% of the time, and
That's
yet
right. And they're the top. Yeah, that's great. A great
he
analogy.
fails 70% of the time, but he just keeps showing up.
Yep.
He just keeps showing up, and so for us, it's like, man, if I just keep showing up and I keep practicing these principles, it is impossible. I just haven't seen it in my world. It's impossible to not have some form of impact
It's
because
impossible.
you didn't even set out. That wasn't your goal. And so I find it hard to call it selfish when you actually just set out to be like, I'm going to do
Yeah.
the best I can with who I am and what I've got.
Yep.
And the best may not even be 100% today. It might be 60, but I'm
That's
showing
right.
up
Yeah.
and just seeing what happens.
I love it. Yeah, man, that's great. So, hey, we're going to tidy up here and get to the end. Any last thoughts? And I want to thank you ahead of time, Mathew Sanjari. And people are going to really, I've learned already a lot from you already. Let me ask you one more question because you're a wealth of knowledge and inspiration. I'm finishing up a health coaching program. It's been going on for months, but it's a kind of a primal health thing. And so I don't want to get too caught up because my website's already like author oriented, and I'm going to maybe have more on the podcast. So I want to have the coaching program, but I don't want to totally switch everything to a coaching framework. So I was thinking maybe having a coaching platform. There's a couple out there just in case people want me to coach them. I can go through that where it handles do you have any kind of platform that you use in your coaching, or do you just, you self-created it?
No, I self-create. I'm hoping to go down that road in a little bit. I think for the first year, I was like, first year and a half now, I said, let's get settled in the business. Let's start to impact people, just, hopping on some podcasts, hopefully into some public speaking soon, and then hopefully into the platforms. But I just haven't wrapped my mind around it yet. But so if you find something good, you need to send it to me.
I will keep in touch with you. And I always find it's so weird, man, that I find, wow, it feels I want to say so far 100% of the time I feel like I've met another friend. And so
awesome.
I feel that with you, Mathew. And I want to thank you for your time. I'm going to link all your stuff, the consultingbyprime.com and /podcast if you want to hear you. And I'm going to send people if they really want to maybe change their culture or be coached either in their business or personally. You'll do either and or. And you're everywhere, Mathew Sanjari, LinkedIn, and they can just plug your name in. And hey, I can't thank you enough, brother. Any final thoughts or words before we wrap this up? And then when we end the broadcast here, we'll just hang out. We'll do a little post briefing.
That's awesome. No, honestly, just thanks for having me. It's been a great conversation. It felt like just we were sitting in your living room and
sitting here having coffee, man. I love it. And those are the best conversations. And sometimes even when you're talking to somebody about a really serious issue, it's not so important that maybe you change their way of thinking, but maybe somebody who's listening from off to the side. Totally. So that's the important thing. And also it reinforces to us. It's kind of like self-talk, all these principles. Love it. Thank you, Mathew. And we're going to end. And everybody else, everybody who's listening in or watching, subscribe to the show. It tells the computers someone is interacting, and they'll show it to more people. You can be of help in spreading a positive, impactful message. All right, everybody. I'll see you on the next episode.